of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision.
Yet another prime ministerial resignation, yet another changing of the guard.
Keir Starmer, the latest victim to this. You played his resignation speech just a few minutes ago.
A phone call, a private conversation between a king and a prime minister. No cameras, no minutes, no public record. And yet everything that happened in that call, and in the dozens of private audiences that preceded it, tells you more about how Britain is actually governed than any speech ever delivered at a dispatch box. On the morning of the 22nd of June 2026, Buckingham Palace confirmed that King Charles III spoke to Keir Starmer by telephone from Highgrove House, before Starmer walked out of Downing Street to announce his resignation. The Prime Minister called the King before he called the British people. He informed the monarch before he told his own cabinet. And the details of that conversation, what was said, what was asked, what was promised, will remain private forever. That is how power works in Britain, and the mainstream media is not asking whether it should. But before we expose the full picture of what the King and Starmer were really doing together behind closed doors, and what it means for the country, let's be honest. Royal coverage in Britain exists to generate warmth, not scrutiny. The audiences, the phone calls, the constitutional choreography, it all gets reported as pageantry. Nobody asks what the King actually said. Nobody asks how much political influence flows through those weekly Wednesday meetings. That's why British front media exists. Subscribe now for what the palace correspondents won't tell you. Reason number 1, Starmer told the King before he told Britain, and that is not a formality. That is how the constitutional chain of command actually works. King Charles spoke to Starmer by telephone while at Highgrove, his country residence in Gloucestershire, before the Prime Minister's public announcement. Starmer confirmed in his resignation speech that he had spoken to the King ahead of the announcement. The contents of that conversation are constitutionally protected. They will never be published. But here is what that conversation represents. The monarch holds the personal prerogative to appoint the Prime Minister. He must be informed first. He must accept the resignation formally, in person, at a subsequent audience at the palace. And when a new Labour leader is chosen, almost certainly Andy Burnham, that person will travel to the palace, meet the King, and be invited to form a government. No vote, no public process. A conversation with a hereditary monarch who will be Britain's head of state until he dies. This is not ceremonial. This is the mechanism by which Britain changes its government. And it is happening right now, in June 2026, with the country's 7th Prime Minister in a decade being installed through a process that begins and ends with a phone call to the King. Reason number 2, Starmer and Charles built a warm rapport over 2 years of private audiences, and nobody outside those rooms knows what was said. Since becoming Prime Minister in July 2024, Starmer met King Charles for customary Wednesday audiences at Buckingham Palace every week for almost 2 years. They are understood to have discussed the war in Ukraine, tensions in the Middle East, and Britain's relationship with Donald Trump. Those are not small topics. Those are the defining geopolitical questions of this era. Questions on which the position of a British Prime Minister has enormous consequences for millions of people, and the King's input into those conversations is constitutionally protected. He is entitled to advise and warn his prime ministers in private. He is expressly forbidden from doing so in public, which means the most powerful unelected man in Britain has been shaping those conversations, and you will never know what he said. The King and Starmer are understood to have developed a notably warm and respectful rapport, with shared interests in social issues and public service shaping their regular discussions. Historian Ed Owens described it as a meeting of minds between a Prime Minister accountable to Parliament and a King accountable to no one, behind closed doors, every Wednesday, for 2 years. The British public were not in the room. Reason number 3, King Charles was used as Starmer's most powerful diplomatic weapon, deployed against Trump when politicians had failed. This is where the relationship between the King and the Prime Minister stops being about warm rapport and starts being about raw political utility. In February 2025, Starmer travelled to the White House to meet Donald Trump. He brought with him a personal letter from King Charles, an invitation for Trump to make a historic second state visit to Britain. Trump read the letter in front of the cameras. He called Charles a beautiful man and a wonderful man, and accepted immediately. The Prime Minister had used the King as a bargaining chip, a diplomatic tool. When Starmer could not get what he needed from Trump through normal political channels, he reached for the monarchy, and it worked, briefly. Trump praised Starmer as a very tough negotiator at that meeting. The relationship warmed, the optics were managed. But then the relationship between Starmer and Trump deteriorated again, over Iran, over the Chagos Islands, over North Sea oil. Trump told the BBC that his relationship with Starmer would only recover if Starmer reversed course on immigration. He said, "This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with." So what did Starmer do? He sent the king to Washington instead. Reason number 4, King Charles addressed the United States Congress in April 2026, deployed by Starmer to fix a relationship his own government had broken. On April 28, 2026, King Charles III delivered an address to a joint meeting of the United States Congress, only the second time a British monarch has ever done so. He and Queen Camilla attended a White House state dinner hosted by Trump. It was the first formal white tie dinner at the White House since President George W. Bush hosted Queen Elizabeth II in 2007. The optics were extraordinary. The politics underneath them were brutal. Trump's warm welcome to King Charles stood in sharp contrast to how he had been publicly attacking Starmer for months. Guardian Foreign Affairs commentator Simon Tisdall wrote that the visit risked becoming a royal endorsement of Trump's person and policies, describing Starmer's approach as an appeasement policy that had miserably failed. Think about what this means. A democratically elected prime minister had so comprehensively failed to manage Britain's most important bilateral relationship that he was forced to use a hereditary monarch as his diplomatic proxy. King Charles was not acting independently. He was acting at the request of the government, deployed precisely because Starmer could not get the job done himself, and the king, constitutionally obliged to remain politically neutral, was put in front of the United States Congress to do what Britain's elected leader could not. Reason number 5. Britain is now on its 4th Prime Minister under King Charles, a rate of turnover higher than at any point in the entire reign of Queen Elizabeth II. King Charles III will in the coming months appoint his 4th British Prime Minister in as many years, a rate of turnover higher than at any point in Queen Elizabeth II's 70-year reign. Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, and now, almost certainly, Andy Burnham, installed not through a general election, but through an internal Labour Party process. Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey called it a merry-go-round of prime ministers. That description is accurate, and it exposes something the palace correspondents will never say out loud. The only constant in British governance right now is the king. He is the one fixed point in a decade of political chaos, and every time a prime minister falls, he gains in relative standing, the permanent figure around whom temporary politicians orbit and disappear. Queen Elizabeth II had 15 prime ministers in 70 years. Charles has had 4 in less than 4. The institution of the monarchy is not weakened by this churn. It is quietly strengthened. Every resignation is another demonstration of political fragility. Every new prime minister travelling to the palace to kiss hands is another reminder of who holds the permanent power. Reason number 6. The next prime minister will be chosen without a public vote and will begin his tenure with a private audience with the king. If Andy Burnham remains the only declared candidate when nominations close on the 16th of July, he could be Prime Minister by the 17th of July 2026. The process ends the same way it always does. Starmer travels to the palace to formally tender his resignation. Minutes later, Burnham arrives. The king asks him to form a government. He accepts. Britain has a new Prime Minister. If the new leader is confirmed before Parliament returns from summer recess on September 1st, that leader could even be required to travel to Balmoral in Scotland to meet the king there. In a Scottish castle, away from cameras, the constitutional handover of power, the most consequential act in British politics, taking place in private, at a royal residence, at the convenience of the monarch's summer schedule. The British public will watch it on the news. They will not be consulted. So here is where Britain stands on 25th June 2026. Starmer called the king before he called the country. He will visit the palace to formally resign in person, as tradition demands. King Charles will then appoint his 4th Prime Minister in less than 4 years, without an election, without a public vote, without scrutiny of what was discussed in 2 years of private Wednesday audiences. The king addressed Congress on Starmer's behalf in April when normal diplomacy had collapsed. Trump was warm to Charles and hostile to Starmer simultaneously, a dynamic that tells you exactly who carries more real weight. And the contents of every conversation between the King and every Prime Minister remain sealed, permanently, from public view. Britain is governed by elected politicians who answer to Parliament and an unelected monarch whose private council shapes every government. The warm rapport between King Charles and Keir Starmer was real. What they actually said to each other will never be known, and the next Prime Minister, whoever walks through that palace door, will begin his tenure the same way, with a private conversation, with a king, with no cameras in the room. Subscribe to British Front Media.